After that last video on mentoring, today we are tackling another huge part of training in Football Manager 2022. And yes, I know that a lot of you guys do not do your own individual training. Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you why you should and how to do it. Let's go. What's up guys, my name is Jochen aka Leyodemus, and today we are in fact going to deep dive into individual training. Now I'm going to show you the general setup, some options you have while setting that all up, and of course I'm going to go over a couple of my tips and tricks. Make sure you keep watching this video until the very end, because after that you should have all the information that you need to master it yourself. But as always guys, if you like this kind of content, feel free to show some support to the FM Scout channel, hit that thumbs up button on every video, and make sure you hit that old subscribe button and the bell so you will be notified when a future video drops. Check out my own channel, Leyodemus, a link is down in the description. I'm currently in the middle of a WONDERKIDS series in Football Manager 22, and there is a live stream coming up with a tier 10 database, London-based journeyman. Should be a lot of fun. Again, link in the description. Check it out. How about we start with the general setup? Now, before you set up the actual individual training, there are a couple of things you might want to check out. First of all, you go to Staff, Responsibilities, Training, and now it is just a question of which team you want to control the training of. In this example, I am managing Independiente, and I am in fact leading the general and the individual training for the first team squad, but I'm still delegating the training for those other squads. Let's say I want to also take control of the under 20 squad. Well, really simple. Take control, enable this checkbox, done. Well, not entirely done, because I have to click confirm, and now you can see that this little thing popped up. So if I select that, under 20s, I can now have like the same detailed overview that I have for my first team squad. I can even set up mentoring within this squad. I can go to individual training, rest, coaches, all these screens we will have a look at later, but just know that is the way to do it if you also want to control the training of your, for example, under 20s squad. Next thing we want to check out is also on the staff tab, but go to overview and then coaching team. Now I am thinking to do an entirely separate episode for the staff and all that comes with it concerning training, but just know a couple of things for now. This is simply an overview of your coaching team, and you can see that I've still got some room to hire, and you can also see the comparison compared to other teams in your league. But maybe the most important screen on the coaching thing is this. Go to training, coaches, and here you can see well, it's almost the same overview, because now you can actually see who is doing what. But if you go to this screen right here, edit coach assignments, kaboom, and this is the screen I want to tell you a couple of things about. Now, in an ideal world, you want a rating of 4 stars or more, but I know it totally depends on what club you are managing / how much money you have. And for the coach workload, you want to go average, maybe sometimes heavy, but I do not recommend to keep it on that. And if you have no idea how to set this up, just go remove all and have a look at your coaches, at their strengths, at their weaknesses, and try and add them to the correct columns depending on that. But also know that you can ask for some help from your assistant by clicking this button. I'm not saying this is always the ideal setup. Far from it, but just know it's a start, and then you can fine-tune it yourself. If you're done with that, press OK, and the last thing I want to show you guys is this. If we go to the training tab again and go for rest, now basically what this does is set the default values for the training intensity, because for every possible condition value, you can actually set the intensity level going with that. So, for example, right after a game, it's probably something like this, the player's condition. Yeah, we don't want any pitch or gym work at that stage. But if they are fully recovered, on the other hand, a beautiful green heart, I do just want them to train a normal intensity. I could ramp this up to double intensity. I sometimes do that in preseason, I'm not gonna lie. But in general, I would advise you to keep this at normal intensity, and for the players where you really want that double intensity, you can overrule it, as we will see later in the video, on a player level. So now let's go to the individual training setup itself. There are a couple of ways to get there. You can go to your squad view, right click on the player, select training, and then you can actually see all of this. And this is everything that has to do with individual training. But you can also, for a more detailed view, click on the player, go to development and training. Now there's probably a couple more ways to get to the same screen, but one thing I really want to show you, if you go to the training tab and click on individual, this is a really handy screen, man, because you can sort by training rating even, if you will. You can select the players that you want, and you basically see the same details as you saw in that previous screen. Now do this however you like. My personal preference is in fact to go to the player development training and set it all up in here. In my opinion, there is just one downside to this, and I guess it is still a bug, because if I click coach report, it is always empty. And I've also tested it with the default skin in Football Manager 22, it stays empty. So I know I can go to reports, coach report, and I still get there. I know. Now a quick overview of the things you see on this screen right here. First of all, there are 3 types of individual training with one kind of, let's say 3.5 types, okay? We have the position training, we have the additional focus, we have the player trait training or untraining, and the 0.5 is the weaker foot training right here. Now I am not sure, but I don't know if this was already in FM21 as well. Help me out, let me know down in the comment section, because I am not sure. But anyway, in FM22 we can in fact do it. You see that it's grayed out right here because this guy Velasco is already reasonable for his weaker foot. This guy, for example, Rodrigo Marquez, another young winger at the club, he's very strong with his left foot, but his right foot is weak. If I then go to development training, you can see that I can actually click start developing weaker foot. Now I am gonna deep dive into every single part of the individual training, no worries, but first I want to discuss a very important concept with you guys, being workload. And right off the bat, the most important thing maybe to understand is that the base workload comes from your team training schedule. Because we now see at Mr. Alan Velasco's training that the individual training workload is at medium, right? For now, we haven't set anything up on his individual training, so if we have a look at the team training schedule, it is now Sunday, so we are here. You can see that we had 2 games and some heavy physical training, so even though Sunday is a rest day, the workload is still based on those previous days, and that is why it says medium. Now deliberately, I have cancelled my friendlies for the upcoming week, and I've also given them no training schedule whatsoever. So it's literally a full week of rest. Let's see what that does for that workload. And it is now the next day, Monday, June 28th, and you can see that in fact my individual training workload is now none. So the thing you have to understand here, guys, is the heavier your team training schedule is, the heavier your base workload for the individual training is, and the more things you are going to add to that, you can kind of see what's happening, right? Injuries incoming, players being unhappy with a too heavy training schedule. It's all because of that workload. So keep a close eye on that. It is super important. Now let's just randomly add a couple of things to his individual training. You know what? I'm going to train him as a midfielder on the left, as a winger. Boom, I'm going to give him the additional focus of free kick taking. Double intensity, please. You can already see that the workload has gone from none to very light, which is still kind of okay, right? But now we're also going to tell him to learn a new trait. For example, attacking, passing training, I don't really care, it's just to prove a point. Convince, boom. And now we've also added the trait to the actual individual training. You can see that it went from very light to light. Now the way players are able to handle a heavy workload or not kind of depends on some attributes. Now the first 2 are actually visible on this screen, being natural fitness and stamina. In short, the higher the better, because the higher those are, the less likely it is that the player will get an injury or become jaded. But next to these, we also have 2 more hidden attributes that determine how a player will cope with a heavy workload. And those are injury proneness and professionalism. Now I know they are not simply visible as was natural fitness or stamina, but if you dig somewhat deeper, you might find out a little information about that. For example, if we take this guy right here, Ezequiel Munoz, and I go to his coach summary, first of all, in the cons section right here, I see might have problems with injuries. But I also see in the pros section, displays resolute characteristics. Now, as I already mentioned in the mentoring episode, it is crucial for you guys to understand those hidden attributes and the personalities in general. So, link down in the description to everything you need to know about those, but please do, because if you understand them, there is a lot of information to gather from these coach reports or also from scout reports if you have scouted a player. So guys, a logical but necessary side note on this is if you have players where you have set everything up as far as individual training goes, but they are not progressing one single bit, and trust me, I've been there. If that is the case, as it was with mentoring, it is probably caused by those hidden attributes and or their personality. So in short, it's really important for their development. Don't be like I was until 3 years ago and just look at their determination and their potential star rating. Don't do it. And that being said, guys, if you have any more questions on individual training or training in general, do not hesitate, use that comment section. I swear to God, I read the questions and the comments and I try to answer them as good as I can. Now let's have a detailed look, shall we, into those different components in the individual training. Now the first thing you want to consider when setting up individual training is it still worth it? What I mean by that is it for example worth it to retrain a 35-year-old winger to play as a center back? The answer is probably no. So I'm not going to give you any age restrictions or all of that funny stuff, but just think about it logically and then the answer will probably come to you. So that being said, first possibility within the individual training is the position training. Now by default, this will be on playing position, and to be brutally honest, it confuses the hell out of me. Because I did some research at what this actually was, and I read a couple of things. One guy said, well, if it's on playing position, it's training the thing you see right here. So in his case, left midfielder, winger on attack, which is exactly the position that I'm playing in or that he is in at this moment in my tactic. Other guys say, no, it's the position he played in last game. I read a couple of different opinions. The one thing that interests me most is the fact that I have set this now to playing position and I have none workload. Now that tells me that nothing is really happening as far as specific role training goes, and also no attributes are highlighted when I select this. If I select any other thing right here, boom, it highlights the attributes that will be trained or that will be focused on in his training. So it is still not 100% clear to me what this does, the playing position. If you know for sure, do not hesitate, let us all know down in the comment section. Now luckily I only use this, the playing position thing, for guys that I know will never have an important role within the club, or maybe some older players that I use for mentoring. That's the only time. For every single player where I see potential in to grow in a certain way, I never leave it a playing position. I always manually choose an option right here. So for example, let's put this back on playing position and let's have a look at Alan Velasco. Now I would say we have a couple of options here, man, because dribbling is already quite high. Remember, he's only 18 years old. Dribbling is 15, determination is good, flair is 14. This screams inside forward to me because his finishing is also quite good with a 12. But I could also go striker on him. Because if I have a quick look, striker, false 9, already quite developed, 3.5 stars. On support, you can see exactly the attributes that will be trained. Now do know that the more attributes are being trained, for example, compare this with the poacher, boom. So as you can see, I think 3 or 4 attributes were not highlighted anymore. So that means less attributes to divide among the time that is given for his individual training, more focus per attribute. Simple. If you have more attributes, the focus per attribute will be less and the progress normally will be slower. But let's say I am using this tactic and I really want Velasco to be on the left wing. Well, I could also do that. So I could go to position, role duty, midfielder left, winger or inverted winger since he's right-footed. But let's go for winger. support. Now he is going to train in a position that is completely new to him. As you can see, he has no idea what's going on. And this is where the third hidden attribute comes into play, versatility. And again, that is another thing you can find in the coach reports, or if players are already somewhat familiar in a couple of positions across the pitch, normally, but not always, that is a good sign. But the least you can do is just try to retrain them into another position, see how it goes. If they really don't like it, you will know. So guys, my advice for this option simply is think outside the box. Do not always follow the logical path like, oh, he's 17, he already is a striker, so I should be training him as a striker. Because that's not always true. He might already have some attributes in place to be the perfect winger, but as long as you're not gonna retrain him and play him, of course, because playing time is very important, in that new position, he's never gonna learn it, is he? And the last thing I want you to know on this option right here, I mentioned in my top 5 training tips video. So guys, if there is one thing and one thing only you remember from today's video, let it be this. Without those sessions in your team training schedules, your individual training will be almost completely useless. And I still stand behind that, but just know it only concerns this part of the individual training right here. The rest of it, the additional focus, the weaker foot training and the traits are separate from that. So everything you set up for those options is additional workload. It doesn't matter. You can't include or exclude that from your team training schedule. The second type of individual training is the additional focus. And let's start with repeating another tip from that 5 tips video. If you have a player on the orange injury icon, like this guy right here, you can go to his individual training, additional focus, and you will be able to select any of these options in the injury rehab menu. Now, what is this? If a player has been injured for a long time, these physical attributes will start declining. There is nothing you can do about it. The one thing you can do, you can come here, select one of these because it shows you which attributes it will kind of affect. And I always go for general rehab because the only goal of this is to minimize that physical decline. That's it. Now, apart from those injury rehab options, I think it is quite obvious what these affect. If you hover over them again, it will show you the actual attributes. Now, the additional focus can be used for 2 things mainly. A, to put an extra focus on an attribute that is already being trained. For example, in this case, I have selected winger support as the position and role for Velasco. I know crossing is already trained because it's one of the highlighted attributes because of this option right here. But let's say I think it is that low, a 9, that I want additional focus on that. Well, lucky me, I go to additional focus, I scroll down and I actually see an option here, crossing, which will affect crossing and technique. So if I select that as well, you can see they were both green. Now they are both blue because blue is the color of the additional focus. Now, if you do it like this, it's a double whammy basically because those 2 attributes get double the attention of all the other green attributes. Think of it like that. So that is one way you can use additional focus. Or let's say if we remove this again, okay, I want him to train as a winger. Fine with me. These attributes are perfectly fine, but I also want to train other weak parts of his game, so to speak, that are of course not covered by the position training. So for example, you know what, free kick taking 11, it's not bad, but I want this guy to be an actual free kick specialist. Well, again, lucky me, additional focus, free kick taking, boom. So it's kind of up to you how you want to tackle this, but just know by adding the additional focus, you're also adding extra workload. Maybe it's not much, but all these small things in the end will probably have some effect, right? Just know that. The third main component of the individual training are the player traits, of course. Now, I think player traits can be broken down into 3 categories, being number 1, player traits that boost a thing that the player is already quite good at. For example, a guy already has 19 or 20 on dribbling and he also has the player trait knocks ball past opponent, which basically makes him a 22 on dribbling, if you know what I mean. Second category of player traits are player traits to mask a player's weakness. For example, let's say you have a central defender with a marking of 12, which is not the greatest, but he also has the player trait marks opponent tightly. You can kind of see that as an extra boost of the weakness that he had, so his marking of 12 in theory may now have become a 14 or 15 just because he has that player trait. And the third category are kind of the mental player traits, I guess. For example, argues with officials, gets the crowd going, stuff like that. It doesn't really affect the technical abilities of the player, but it's more like a mental thing. You know what I mean, right? Let's have a look at Alan Velasco. I, for example, see that he already has a 15 on dribbling. So let's discuss a new trait, technique training. And I am going to say, I would like you to start coaching Alan to look to try to beat his man repeatedly whenever the opportunity arises. Skadoosh. And behind the scenes, every single player trait is kind of linked to a specific attribute, in this case, dribbling. So the feedback that I get now is, I think it's a good choice, blah blah blah. It's a trait that suits good dribblers like him. Now, he is going to start training the player trait, and you can see that my workload is still on very light, but if I now go to double intensity, it actually goes up to light. And you can also see that if I cancel the training of this player trait, it goes also back to very light, because that's a part of the extra workload that I just canceled. So that's how you kind of have to understand the combination of all those things makes up for the entire training workload for every player. Now let's focus on our other winger again, Rodrigo Marquez. I see that he has a 12 on his finishing and a 10 for composure. So he's not the most refined finisher, right? So if I, for example, want to train his player trait, I would like you to start coaching Rodrigo to place his shots into the corner of the net. They give me a negative advice, and it actually says it's a trait that suits players with composure, which isn't one of his strengths. Now you have a couple of options, or you accept and then nothing happens, or you convince your assistant or whoever that you are actually right, which you could try. It wouldn't hurt to try, but know that if the feedback is negative, there is usually a reason behind that. Or the third option you have is to actually receive a suggestion for a trait we should get him to work on. Let's do that. And my assistant manager says, I think it would be beneficial if he was encouraged to play 1-2 passes. So he reads the game well, and if we can develop this trait in his game, he'll be even better. That's exactly what I meant at the beginning about having player traits that actually boost an already decent quality that a player has. And again, it's your option now. I'm just gonna go with your suggestion sounds awesome. And quick chat, this guy is now training plays 1-2s. And the way to untrain a player trait is exactly the same. For example, let's go back to Velasco. He already had the player trait cuts inside from the left wing. If I want to untrain that, I simply go to a coach, and this is probably going to be movement training. And one of the options in this case will be, I would like you to start coaching Alan to stop cutting inside from the left wing as often as he currently does. If I select that, I'm just gonna go convince now, boom, and quick chat, and you can see that this trait is actually being untrained, and it's the exact same extra workload that is added to his overall workload as I was training a new trait. Now, one thing I really want to mention here, guys, is this. If you are focusing on all these things at the same time, so for example, you've set everything up as I have done here with Velasco, know that the time available for this player for his individual training will be divided among everything you have set up. What I'm trying to say is, if there is something that is really important to you, let's say for example, I want Velasco to unlearn this trait as fast as possible, it might even be the best idea for a couple of months, or at least until that trait is untrained, to leave his additional focus to none and maybe even set this to playing position. So just know that it is perfectly okay and even a good thing to prioritize certain areas of individual training for each player. And that brings us to the last big chunk of today's video, the follow-up. Because even if you have set everything up in the individual training department, time goes by, the question is, what's next? Well, I'll tell you. First of all, you will get emails saying who did well and who didn't in training. Quick tip, praise the players who have a training rating of more than an 8 and criticize players who have a training rating less than 6.5. But apart from that, there is a very handy screen that I want to show you right now. If you go to Dynamics, Happiness, you actually have a training column right here. At any given point in time, you can come here, check this column just to have an idea of how happy/unhappy the players are with their current training. And if you hover over the player, it will in fact tell you what is wrong. But what I like to do is simply to go to the player's profile, development, individual training. And now we have a couple of things we can check. What I usually do is to simply start reading the training report. In this case, it's not really that clear to me, to be honest, because the training report says, has benefited from additional training focus, nice, progressed well in training or progressing well in training even, but he feels that the individual training he has been assigned to work on is not producing any results. I'm not really sure when I read this where the actual problem is, but luckily we have raw data. If I click on training report, it takes me to this screen, and I think by default it is the progress tab that opens, but I am more interested in the attributes tab because I know that his additional focus is on free kick taking. So if I just select free kick taking, should he be explicitly complaining about this, about his additional focus, that it's not producing any results, I can literally come here and check if he is right or wrong. And it's the exact same thing for his position training, because I am now training him as a Raumdeuter on attack, right? I can go to his training report, and up here you can select the role that you want. For example, Raumdeuter. There it is. Attack. These are the attributes being trained, and you can already see the arrows, but you can check the raw data in here if you want to. But you can see the arrows going up. And apart from the training reports, you can always come and check the medical reports as well. Just look out for things like this, because it can, in fact, depending on how injury prone the player is, of course affect their whole season. And to close off this topic, I really want you to know about one more thing the game simply offers us. All we have to do is click it. If you are on a player's profile, you go to development and to advice. They will, if you are in any doubt of what the exact issue is, like we had before with Marquez, if you come here, they will probably tell you exactly what's going on. And of course, it's up to you if you want to take the advice or if you want to be stubborn and ignore it, but just know that the development advice functionality is awesome. Poof. I think that is about everything I can tell you about individual training. Again, guys, if you have any questions, use the comment section. Do not be shy. I promise I read them and I'll try to answer them. And I know we've already briefly touched the team training stuff with those cards with the individual roles in them, but I promise you next episode we will do a monster dive into those team training schedules. I will tell you everything I know about that in that next video. But as always, guys, if you appreciate me going through the effort to make these videos, do not hesitate. Show the FM Scout channel some support. Like the videos, subscribe to the channel, and also feel free to check out my own channel, Leyodemus, link down in the description. All that is left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support, and I hope you all stay safe and have an awesome day. Peace out.